be is when I try to play and use my whole screen to show the video. Let's try that. Okay, so one of my favorite sayings about writing is this quote from Charles Darwin. He wrote to his colleague Lyell in 1867. He says, "I hope you're getting along with your book better than I am with mine, which kills me with the labor of correcting and is intolerably dull, though I did not think so when I was writing it. Okay, and this is the part I want to emphasize. A naturalist's life would be a happy one if he had only to observe and never to write." So Darwin obviously thought writing was very difficult and often not very pleasant. And that's true. It's very hard work. I think it's the hardest mental work I have ever done, I would say. But I also say it's the most fulfilling mental work I've ever done. And I'm amazed whenever I write how much I learn. And so I'd like to emphasize today that you should think of making images as part of the writing process. So today I want to talk about the purpose of illustrations, the types of illustrations, preparing figures, talk about figure captions, and about citing figures within the text. And then I want to end with something about data integrity. Now, Christina, can you see this? Can we see this okay? Okay, good. All right, so why use illustrations? Well, illustrations have been a form of writing, and if you go down to Newspaper Rock, this is a little bit south of Arches National Park and Moab. If you go to Moab and go a little bit south, and then you go a little bit west, you can see this amazing little thing called Newspaper Rock, where some ancient people put a whole bunch of stuff here on this rock, something about what they were doing and the world they lived in. And from what I understand, we still don't understand what they wrote. But this does convey information. We can tell that they had animals and they knew about animals, and we can recognize some of them. And there's even wheels over here on the right side. Something that looks like a wheel. And somebody riding can you see this cursor? Okay, so here's somebody who looks like they're riding maybe a horse. Anyway, a lot of interesting information here, and hopefully someday we'll understand what they were writing. So when you write, you need to think about what medium is the best way to convey information. Is it words? Is it by doing some kind of an illustration, a figure? Is it a table? If there's something often with math involved, or even sometimes if there's not, equations can be very, very helpful ways to convey information. So let's talk, though, today we're going to mostly want to talk about figures. So let me show you this. This is a structure of poliovirus. We're dealing with a lot of viruses these days, or one big virus. This is another one that actually people dealt with 50 or 60 or 70 years ago, poliovirus, and this is what it looks like. And as you look at this, how would you convey this in words? It'd be very difficult to convey this in words, and much easier to convey this with a picture. Here's a couple of other illustrations, amazing illustrations. Here on the left, from the Hubble Space Telescope. How would you describe this with words? I think it's really inadequate. Just the stunning, I mean, just the beauty of it is just amazing. But even in terms of scientifically, this information is conveyed a lot more clearly and a lot easier by this image. You can also look here at this footprint from, I guess, it's now 51 years ago, where the footprint of when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. And that one footprint, what does that say? That one image just says something that is you just can't say that with words. Now, if you also think about the COVID pandemic that we're dealing with now, think of some of the images that you've seen on TV or in the newspaper. or on the web, you know, some of those images are just striking, and we'll always remember this time because of those images. I mean, think of people getting the test, you know, that the wad up their nose, you know, a picture of that. For those, I've had tests a couple of times, and that has conveys some information to me when I see an image like that. So images are very, very powerful ways to convey information in ways words cannot. All right, how about this one? This is a scientific one in my field. This is a bacterial virus called bacteriophage T4. Our guts are full of these, and they help us, and they help regulate the population of bacteria and actually help the bacteria in many ways. So one of the things that was interesting about this virus is that they actually put a lot of DNA in the head. Now this is the head right up here. This is called the head, and this is the tail, and this has some little appendages on the tail that help it attach to a bacterium and as it infects that bacterium. But one of the striking things about this is I just told you that it has a lot of DNA in there. Well, this image right here says this in a lot more powerfully than I can with the words I just used, right? I mean, look at that. All of that long string that you see there, all of that is packaged into this tiny, tiny little head, that's just astonishing. And so this is a very powerful way. This is one of my favorite pictures from the electron microscope. I didn't take this, but it was actually taken even before I was born. But anyway, this is a very powerful way to convey the information that these tiny viruses can package a huge amount of DNA in this tiny little space. And you'll find that in your work too, that sometimes an image will just convey something in a way that you just cannot do with words or in a table or an equation. Okay, so let's talk about types of information, and we want to think about what type of information is conveyed, and we want to think about what form conveys information in the best way. All right, and you can even combine you can combine figures and to make a table of figures, or you can add figure with equations, or we'll add words. You can add words to your pictures. And an important thing when writing is be willing. You need to draft it first, and sometimes you won't get it right the first time. You probably won't. Just like with words, it's very, very difficult to get things right the first time, but it often takes getting those bad words in to get to help you get to the good words. And the same is true with figures. And so one of the important things in writing is to be willing to discard what you've done, your hard-earned effort, for a better way. And that's not easy to do. Okay, so here's a couple of types of illustrations. There's a line graph here on the left and a bar graph on the right. And we might ask, what kind of information do these graphs show? Well, this is kind of showing a trend. So this is over a spatial distance. This is showing changes in density. This is showing a magnitude. The bar graph is showing a magnitude. In this experiment, the people had 7 samples. 2 had something in it. 5 had a little bit in it. The rest of them didn't have anything in it. And so this can show a magnitude. I'll show some other examples later. Here's a pie chart. So if we look at the University of Utah here, this can convey an information. It lets us see, wow, there's a lot more undergraduates than certainly graduate students and faculty, but boy, we sure have a lot of staff here as well. And this pie chart conveys information in a way that you could say, well, we have a lot of staff and a lot of undergraduates, but this pie chart can convey it in a way that really gets the point across. This is a chemical structure, and those of you who who are in chemistry would recognize this, or have had chemistry will recognize these structures. And these convey information in a specific way. They're just lines and words and letters and numbers, but they do convey information in a special way that people who have studied chemistry can understand well. Here's another scheme, okay? And so in this case, this chemical, it's actually the same chemical, but it changes into a different form, and this means light here. The light hits the chemical and causes it to change. And so this is called a scheme, and this can help show a process. Here's another way of showing a process with a flow chart. This was an undergraduate student I worked with in 2006, she wrote a report about how spent nuclear fuel is processed. And again, there's a lot of words in here, but it's put together in a way that's a figure. It's a figure, and it shows processes and a flow chart. Here's another one. This is one that we use in our lab, where we take samples and we process them and put them in the microscope and take pictures. But anyway, this shows a certain process. Here's another type of figure called a map. Okay, and those of you who have hiked are probably familiar with this, or done mountaineering are familiar with this. This type of a diagram, and this has it shows a specific way of conveying heights. Another form of illustration are simply photographs. Oh, sorry for this. Notes there, but this is here's a picture of John Wesley Powell. If you were writing about a history, or maybe even describing the Grand Canyon, you might want to include a picture of John Wesley Powell or some other person who studied the canyon. And this again has a powerful way to convey information. Some data is given as illustrations. This is actual real data of poliovirus. This is from work I've done, and this has this conveys information. Again, it'd be very difficult to write this. So another form of illustration that we can do is called a stereo pair. Here's a study of poliovirus, and these two pictures, the one on the right and one on the left, if you look at them if you just look at the one on the right with your right eye and look at the one on the left with your left eye, your brain will merge these and it'll look three-dimensional to you. So that's one thing you can do, is to make if three dimensions is important, you can make these stereo pairs, and that can be a nice way for readers to be able to get information that the writer want to convey to them. So that's just another type of illustration. Now, here's a couple of movie frames, and if you display movie frames, it's often very difficult to see anything different. So as you look at these, I bet that it'd be difficult for you to see any differences in this. But if I display them as a movie, and let's see if I can get the movie to play. Yes, okay. Now, if I play this movie, the differences are very clear. You can see these are actually proteins that are part of hepatitis B virus, and you can see that they change position, and this change in position was important for the study that was involved here, and this movie shows it in a way that's much easier to see than this previous form. Okay, so in some cases, movies, you should think about doing a movie for your writing. And the nice thing about having the internet these days is, versus the print magazines and journals that we used to have, that were more common many years ago, is that you can put movies in your writing, and this can be a very effective way to convey information. Here's another movie. I showed you this structure of poliovirus earlier. I gotta play it. And so there you go. So now it rotates, and this can, again, convey information in a way that may be important for what you're trying to, the message you're trying to convey. Okay, so we might want to ask, when are tables? What about tables? And I just want to talk briefly about them because you may wonder, well, what should I use, an illustration or a table? So tables are appropriate if data can be presented more clearly than in narrative or a figure. So if it's more clear to you as a writer, then use a table. Then if it's more clear than it would be in their text or in a figure, use a table. The tables are very appropriate if you need to present many precise numbers. It'd be very difficult to do that in a figure or in words. In words, trying to give a lot of precise numbers could really confuse your readers. And use a table if more meaningful interrelationships can be conveyed. And I will say, you as a writer, you may need to try it both ways. Try it as a figure, then try it as a table and see what looks better. And you may need to get the opinion of other people as well on that and see what they think. So let's look at an example here. Here's U.S. deaths in 2015. So presented in a table. So we've got the cause of death, excuse me, with single causes up here and the top, heart disease and so forth, cancer and so forth, and then others, quite a few in others. So out of with 733 deaths, then you can divvy out the percentage. Now, it depends. If your point is to be able to give a reader lots of different numbers, then this might be appropriate. But if you're just trying to give people a sense that, wow, heart disease is really and cancer are really significant causes of death, you may want to think about using a pie chart. So here's a pie chart, and this conveys, again, in ways that are really more striking than this table. So consider that. And you might want to point. You can see here too that, oh wow, yeah, there's a lot of people dying from heart disease, but there are a lot of other things that people die from as well, that aren't listed. Now, so you can do a pie chart. Here's a pie chart without giving numbers, but if those numbers are important, do a pie chart with numbers in it, like this. Okay, so you just need to try things, and you need to just try different ways of doing it, drafting different things, and again, being willing to throw out the ones that don't convey it the best way. That actually reminds me of, while we're just thought of something that I like to do that makes it easier to throw away things. That is one of the biggest challenges I have found in writing, is you've put so much work into this paragraph or this figure or this table that throwing it away just, oh my goodness, I can't just throw this away. What I've found is I've started making a file called extra words. And so as I'm writing, if I think I've got something that is a paragraph that says something nice and I like it, but it's not really fitting into what I'm writing, I take that paragraph out and put it in my extra words file, or near the end of the document in a section I call extra words. And you can do the same thing with figures. You make a figure that look nice, and you just don't want to throw this away because you put a lot of effort into it, and it might be helpful in some other situation for a presentation or something that you give. Well, put it into a different folder. Just put it into your folder for, extra figures folder, and then it won't be so difficult. Then you're not really throwing it away, and you can use it if you come back, if you see a need to come back to it. Okay, so here we talked earlier about bar graphs that are good for showing magnitudes. So here's again this same data, excuse me, presented as a bar graph. And again, this actually may be better than these pie charts, right? You can again give the numbers. Notice the numbers here that are listed, if those numbers are important. But this can show strikingly, again, heart disease, cancer, and it may be easier to see some of these smaller ones as well than in a pie chart like this. Anyway, you just have to decide what works for you. And sometimes it may be a toss-up and you just have to choose. Here's another way. This is a line, that same data viewed as a line graph. And I would say this is probably the least effective way to present this data. I think bar graph would be much clearer to present this data. But again, try it different. You may need to try it different ways as you draft different figures as you write. Okay. Oh, now if you were looking at trends, this is especially good for line graphs. And here we have deaths from 1950 to probably 2015, and look at the trend here. So we can see deaths per 100,000 population, the death rate has really dropped. However, for cancer, it really hasn't dropped so much like other things. And you can see, well, heart disease has really gone down. People aren't dying of heart disease as much. But other things, suicide and diabetes, again, it seems relatively flat compared to these other things. So this line graph is very effective for showing trends. So this is trends over time. This is a trend, deaths versus time. Here's another example. So, and maybe if you'd like to chip in here, what do you like about this? And what of this is a drawing of, it's the same kind of a duck. This is a Gadwall duck. Which one do you like the best? Anybody like to chip in here? So when would you want the drawing and when would you want the photograph?
I think that the photograph kind of draws away from the duck a little bit.
Okay.
Because it seems just so boxy, whereas the duck drawing just seems to be part of the page.
Okay. Okay.
So if you're just trying to talk about the duck in general, then I would say the left one. But if you're trying to talk about like a specific duck or like ducks in the wild, perhaps like a study where you're examining specific ducks at a specific pond, then I would use the right. But otherwise, I'd probably use the left.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts? I don't know if any of you have ever looked at wildlife guides or guides for trying to identify birds or trees or something like that. And sometimes you'll see some with drawings in them, and sometimes you see some with photographs. And I think I personally like, for identifying things, I like the one on the left, the drawing, because it's not so, you're not so confused by the shadows that you have here on the right. But again, as the person said, this one on the right may be better for showing it in the context, showing it in a real context. And you may want both. I mean, in fact, probably some bird guides like to do the one on the right, and some use the one on the left. But maybe the real useful thing would be to have both. And sometimes both would be helpful. Here's an example where types of figures are combined. And so this is a panel of figures, and many times in many publications, you can have different types of figures joined together in a composite figure. And this is often helpful, especially if you're trying to save space, or if the journal is trying to save space. Some journals, scientific journals, for example, really put a premium. You have a limited number of pages that they can publish, and so they'll often put a lot of figures together into a composite figure. This is great. These kind of thing can be great for a for a printed article that readers have a lot of time to be able to look and, oh, I'll look at part A, and then they can come back and look at part B, and then part C later for something else. But this is often not very useful in presentations like I'm giving today. If I were giving these are viruses, and if I were giving a talk on these viruses, I don't know that I would present it like this. That can often be confusing because in a presentation, it's often not helpful to have composite figures. But in a paper where people have time to look at complicated figures and take the time to do that, that's fine. Equations are another very effective and powerful way to transmit information. For those of you who have physics, the top equation has some very powerful meanings. Force equals mass times acceleration. And that's what that means. And that's a very important concept in physics. Likewise, the bottom one is a chemical equation. This is one that that occurs all around us in photosynthesis. So we have carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of this is carbon dioxide, and 6 molecules of water combined to form a carbohydrate and oxygen. And it's a very important process to life. And so this particular chemical equation is a very powerful way to convey information. And this may be better than a figure. So again, you just have to think about what works best. All right, so preparing figures. I would recommend that you prepare it at the size that it will appear. So printing isn't as common. Printed and paper documents aren't as common as they used to be. However, people will still often print them out, and when it's put on the web, you need to make sure that it's not going to be too pixelated. Often you have a limit on the file sizes, and so you need to make sure that when readers look at it, that they'll be able to see what you want to see. So the same principle applies whether it's printed on paper or put on the web. Is that the people need to be able to see the information that you're trying to convey. And if lines are too thin, or too thick, they will not people will not be able to get the message that you're trying to send. And things will often look very different on your if you use a program you use, say use Excel, Microsoft Excel, to make a graph or a line graph. They can often look very different in Excel than they will printed in a PDF file on the web. So you need to make sure that you look at them the way they will appear. And don't make lines too thin. I'll give you an example of this. Yeah, so this is just what I said. Sometimes what looks good on your computer will not look good in other forms, even PDF files or in print, if it's in print, or other forms, okay? Okay, so let's look at this. So this actually looked pretty good on my computer. This is US deaths, again, that death data. Oh, so this is actually comparing some of those ones that were very far down on that graph, this graph right up here. So this is diabetes and suicide. So if we blow the scale up here, you can see some different trends than were apparent in the other case. But isn't this is hard to see, isn't it? But this is much clearer to see. But this might look funny to you when you're making a figure. But if you printed it out as it's going to appear to others, then you'll be able to see clearly that this makes a lot more sense to make a figure like this than it does to make it like this. So again, make sure you print it out or make the figure as it will appear to your readers. So we said, prepare the size it will appear, don't make lines too thin. Also, keep it as simple as possible without clutter. Label clearly and use color only when it serves a purpose. So let's see. I think I have some examples of this. Yes. Okay. Yes, I do. All right. So everything you do should have a purpose in helping convey information in the clearest possible way to your readers. And by everything, I mean, I don't just mean the figure. I mean the text, the tables, and of course the figures. Okay, so here's an example. All right, so somebody got a little fancy and made a nice three-dimensional plot of these trends. So this here's some years. This is back in the 1900s. So 1981 to 1996, I believe. This is, I'm not sure what this scale is here, but these are different countries. And whatever it is for Latin America, let's see, I can't quite read that one. Here's the European Union and the United States. Anyway, there's some particular trend here, but really, do you need to make this complicated for something like this? Don't do that. Just the two-dimensional graph would be fine for this. So don't do things that aren't necessary. All right, here's another graph I pulled off of a paper from my field. But why did they put blue here? What's the purpose? Why use blue here? And you know, maybe it looks pretty, but just use color when it's necessary. You don't need to use color here. But now this one, look at these two. This is the poliovirus structure I showed you earlier. So in many ways, this one on the left that's colorized actually helps.
We can't hear you anymore.
Oh, what happened?
Oh, now we can.
Okay.
Sorry.
So where did you lose me on this one?
Pretty much the beginning of that slide.
Oh, okay. Okay, so here's a slide. So I talked here about this one where really color is not necessary. But here, color really does help. The one on the left, you can see this is the poliovirus structure I showed earlier. And the depth, see this color here, you can see some depth here easier than you can on this one. And so color can actually enhance things, but don't just use color to use color. It's good to have a purpose. All right. And I should say in the good old days, I'm not sure how much it is a factor now, but it used to be quite expensive to do things in color, and so you had a financial incentive to get your figures in black and white or gray. Okay, now about figure captions. So think of the figure caption as part of the figure. So that you've got the drawing itself or whatever it is, the line graph or whatever it is you've made, your flow chart, but you're going to have a caption usually with it, and you need to consider this as part of the figure and use the same care and strong writing. And anyway, do a good job with this one as well. Don't just make a pretty picture and hope that your readers can figure it out. Help them by making a good caption. And so usually what you'll do in a caption is have a figure, usually a number, and then it's followed by a title that's usually not a sentence, and then followed by sentence descriptions. So for example, here it could say poliovirus, and then I could go on to describe it in different ways. Okay? All right, and so make the figure caption understandable without reference to anything else. So a reader can go to here, and don't make them chase all over the rest of your paper having to figure it out. Just have everything there in the caption so they can understand the figure. You do cite appropriate references for the information in your figure, and you can give credit lines at the end of the caption. So, for example, I've worked on a review article, and we got some permission to use some public pictures from previous work. Like the one of the bacteriophage DNA I showed you earlier, and we had to get permission, and so we give credit at the end of the caption for where the picture came from. All right, so now let's go back to let's talk about citing figures within your text itself. In science, at least, the convention is, and probably is the same elsewhere, that the figures are numbered sequentially by the order that they appear, that they're cited in the text. So figure 1 would be the first one that you would cite within your text. And every figure should be cited in the text. If the figure is important for your paper, then cite it in the text somehow. And I suggest that you refer to the figure informatively, followed by the parenthetical reference to the figure, and we'll talk about that. And think about what message do you want the reader to get from the figure, okay? So in your text, when you're doing a figure, what do you want the reader to get from that figure? Okay, so let me give you a couple of ways that you can cite this. So you could say that figure such an X shows this something, okay? And in this case, it shows the steps of translation in a ribosome, okay? The steps of translation in the ribosome are important, but the concept here is figure X is showing you something. Well, that's sort of helpful, but more helpful would be for me to think as the author, what do I really want them to see in that figure? And this is maybe what I want them to see, that this translation process occurs in the ribosome and involves 10 steps. And in figure X, I'm going to show those 10 steps. So that's more informative and is better. I think this is a better way to cite figures within the text itself. All right. Okay. Lastly, I want to talk about integrity. So I want to end with integrity. So decide now. I want to encourage you all of us, myself included, to decide now that we won't plagiarize. That means take someone else's work and pretend it's our own. So always cite information from others. That includes in figures. Just in your caption, just say, where the idea or adapted from or something like that. Just do it and make sure you do in your writing, of course, as well, in your text as well. So decide now that you won't violate copyright. So if you're using something that somebody else has already published, get permission. You need to get permission for that to publish it again, and just do it. This is the best way to do and saves you so much trouble later on. And probably most importantly for us is decide now that you'll be ethical. Don't distort data and don't fake results. It's not worth the price. It's not worth what you might gain. It just isn't. So let me show you some examples. So here was something published many years ago, and this is back at Cornell, and so they had this on this. This is just a newspaper, I guess, a student newspaper or a community newspaper. They're in Ithaca, New York. So here it's showing you that tuition. Wow, tuition's going up, but wow, it looks like the ranking of the university is really going down. Wow, my tuition really isn't worth as much. Well, that's what you would look at this and think that's the message you get. Well, interestingly, that's something really wrong with this. So look at this. So now if we put the years in here, notice that they've merged these two curves as if they're representing the same time period, but they're really not. So this top one started in 1966. This last one started in 1988, and this one ended in 1999. This one ended in 1997. Well, that's a little dishonest, isn't it? Even more interestingly, look at this. So the ranking, so it went from here 11th and actually got better. Now the Cornell's ranked 6th. So actually the tuition actually was here. So the graph really started here in 1988. But it actually looks like their tuition really was a good thing. And the ranking improved. So be honest with how you present things as well. All right, I want to show you a case that occurred in our lab, in the electron microscope lab. So this is the picture that was taken in our lab in 2013. When it was published, it looked like this. Actually the background. Let me see if I can show you the merge. Well, I don't want to. I'll have to get off maybe if I do that. But I have a way. If I were able to show this normally, I'd show it blending one into the other. But somebody put this. I've blown this up here. But a graduate student here at the University of Utah added these little things to this picture. So it and when it was under review and the paper was under review, a reviewer who was quite astute happened to blow up the picture and saw that, wow, it looks like they've added something to the picture here. And sure enough, they had. Here's another case, and you can see here, they've basically used Photoshop or something like it to add these little pictures of these. These are actually called nanorods. And so they added it to this picture. I will also say that they did not show us this before they published it, or the person in my laboratory who took these pictures would have recognized it. I remember when I showed this to her, this picture, she said, "Oh, I didn't take that. That's not what it looked like when I took it." Anyway, there was an investigation. This person who had done this lost his PhD. His PhD was taken from him because of this, because he had fabricated this data. It's not worth it. Don't do it. If your study is worth it and is important, as important as usually the reason people do this is they want to make a splash in the world, and if your data is going to make a splash, people are going to check up on it, and you'll get caught. Don't do it. It's not worth it. And I also want to say too that a lot of the comment online and so forth about when this paper came out or when it was discovered, this went viral, and a lot of people said, "What a stupid Photoshop job they did." I want to argue that not being good at Photoshop was not their problem. That's not the problem they had. The problem is they fabricated data. Don't do it. We have a public trust. The public depends on us to be honest, and we have an obligation to the public who funds most of our work to be honest. So anyway, don't do it. All right. That's my presentation, and I'd love to take questions if you have some.
Does anybody have any questions? I'm also going to throw the evaluation form in the chat for you to all fill out, or you can go on our website and fill it out as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
What sort of software do you use usually to make graphs?
So I myself, to make like line graphs or bar graphs, for line graphs and bar graphs, I would use Excel. I would just use Excel.
All right.
Or something similar. I think there's also OpenOffice, LibreOffice. I think those are some free ones. Those I think would work well as well. And there's some other packages that are a little more fancy, I believe. But I found those would work for me.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else?
This isn't really a question, but for anybody who is using a package like R to make graphs and things, if you're using R Markdown to write your report, you can create counters for your figure numbers. I know that, like for me, I've had I have like, I think 39 figures so far, and I'm not done with them. And I have no idea where they're going to go in the end paper. And so I've created, after each code chunk, like a counter so that if I move it around, it will just name the figure for me. So I don't have to like go back and change all the figure 10s to figure 12s if I move them.
Nice.
So that's just something that has helped me a lot to keep track of like which figures are where when I'm referencing them.
Nice. Yeah, that's nice. And maybe for example, in Word or some of those word processing packages, they might have a similar way to keep track of things. I've not used that, but maybe they do too. Yeah, that can be a challenge if you if you insert a figure somewhere in your text. You have to renumber, and be careful that you keep everything numbered correctly. Yeah, that can be a challenge. So I do have a handout I could pass out if there's any if people would like that. I could. Are you doing that, Christina? Are there handouts that? Oh, okay.
Stephanie might.
Oh, okay.
I can talk to Stephanie and see, but.
Okay. All right. Sure. I have a handout that I've given in the past that has some basic things on it.
Okay, we could, if you send it to Stephanie, we could probably share it with everyone.
Okay.
We have their registration, who's been here.
All right.
Well, thank you. This was really great. I learned a lot. I needed this when I was in graduate school, so thank you.
Well, if any of you have any questions, I don't know if my email's been broadcast, but it's david.belnap@utah.edu. I'd be happy to help if any of you have any questions. If you'd like to talk to me privately.